Square Enix versus Square Soft. What's good, my fellow peasants? How you all doing? So this is the old legendary debate, argument that has raged between fans for years now, since the merger happened pretty much. And while I'm not here to tell you which was better, Enix or Soft, that is of course your opinion. You know, which games did you prefer under that era? But that's the thing I want to talk about. Which games do people associate with Enix and Soft? There are so many false notions on which games were Enix and which games were Soft. There are so many false notions about the merger, about the characters that came aboard, the changes in presidents, what happened with Sakaguchi. So many false facts out there that have led people to come to absolutely ridiculous conclusions on why Enix might be better or why Soft might be better. Often it is the old craggy nostalgia fans who are saying Square Soft was better, those were the good days, the golden days, and Enix ruined it all. Let's be real, that's the more common of the two. Now I'm not going to get into my opinions on it just yet. I'm going to get into the facts, I'm going to get into the history, because the history of the merger is a crazy one. There's so many facts in here that I didn't even know. So let's kick off. I'm going straight over to a thread that appeared on NeoGAF back in 2014, done by a member called Anaron, and this is an absolute gem. When I found this, I thought I'd stumbled on a gold mine. So shout out to this thread, it's super old, but we're going to break this down. The history of the Square Enix merger. Let's go! So we are going back, way back to 1995, where the Gooch himself was appointed president of Square LA Incorporated, a US operations base for research and development. And the significance of this decision cannot be understated. This was the first time Square, and indeed JRPGs, had aggressively been targeted for the West. We'd become a customer, we'd became a focus rather than kind of a neglected thought at the end. So that was a huge move. Then we go on to 1997, which is where Square Pictures set up a Honolulu, Hawaii base for creating Final Fantasy and other computer animated films. That's right, we're talking about the films. And I think you know where this is going, because there's one FF film in particular that hugely attributed to a lot of the struggles that we're about, but we'll get onto that. Moving on to 1998, Square and Columbia Pictures team up to bring one of the biggest gaming franchises to the silver screen with a contract to split the costs and profits for 3 pictures. So there was going to be 3 films, and Chris Lee, the president of Columbia Pictures, he was sold on the idea of making FF movies. He actually referenced Ants the movie. Considering the recent success of titles like Ants and its computer animated predecessors, Final Fantasy the movie has the potential to be an even bigger success since it has such a long history. Another quote, "The movie will be a realization of a dream to create a brand new form of entertaining, uniting computer games and motion pictures, using the latest in CG animation technology." So huge ambitions, huge dreams. Everyone thought this Final Fantasy movie was going to be a clear success, and that's why these big pictures were more than willing to back it. Then we go on to 2000, Final Fantasy's riding pretty high. FF7 was an absolute smashing success, and they want to continue the franchise. So on January the 29th of 2000, they announced Final Fantasy 9, 10, and 11. They were officially revealed, and not only did they announce that those games are in development, but they announced that 9 and 10 would be out before the end of next summer, that summer in Japan. I mean, I was only 8 at the time, so I can't remember, but to have 2 FF titles announced to be coming for that summer, wow, that must have been an exciting time. Staying in 2000, but moving to February the 17th, at the PS Festival, Square formed an alliance with Disney, brackets Kingdom Hearts, and the idea for the game originated from Sakaguchi and Hashimoto. They were the ones who came up with the idea for Kingdom Hearts. It wasn't even Nomura. Another huge bombshell that I did not know. Then Yoichi Wada also joined Squaresoft in June of 2000. And this guy right here is going to play a huge role in the Enix to Squaresoft merger. He's going to play probably the biggest role. And by the end of this video, you will either see him as a villain or a hero of the franchise. But moving on, and also at this point, Square and Enix, they start toying with the idea of a merger. And it's a clever idea. They're both pumping out JRPG games, while as Enix have the capital, they have the big bucks that could certainly fund a lot of Square's work. Square has the contacts, they have the foothold in the US at this point that Enix just simply do not have, so they can both benefit from each other with this merger, so talks and discussions begin. Now moving on to 2001, January the 19th, Square announces FF10 to be delayed. That's right guys, delays did happen before Square Enix. Now the reason for the FF10 delay was just a quality thing, they didn't feel like it was quite there and they needed more time, so that's commendable, but this was also the time that the company first ever went into its red. It had its first dot of red ink in its history. Now the reason for this isn't as bad as it sounds. They had investments for movie titles coming in movie studios, and 3 upcoming FF titles, and also that Kingdom Hearts, a brand new franchise that they were kind of experimenting with. So a hell of a lot of investment going on at this point, so it makes sense. And it didn't seem to faze anyone or the business, because 3 days later, on the 22nd of January, Square were in talks with both Nintendo and GBA, Game Boy Advance, and they announced the development of FF12 with Sakaguchi assigning Matsuno and Aito to the project. Sakaguchi. Now, I want to pause here and just emphasize at this point, there has been no Enix and Soft merger at this point. It hasn't even happened, and look what is already in the pipeline. Not only have they started working on 12, and Sakaguchi is assigning people to it, they've also got 11 in the pipeline, and they've also got 10-2. 10-2 was already in works at this point, and it's still Square Soft. And that already clears up so many misconceptions, because when I see people argue about who's better, Enix or Soft, a lot of people seem to think that Soft ended at 10. Anything from 10 and below were Soft, and everything from 10-2 and above, Square Enix is responsible. It couldn't be further from the truth. Squaresoft made 12, they made 11, they made 10-2, so you can tell that the change in the franchise, the exploration, the experimentation, different forms of gameplay, making one of them an MMO, different world structures, different combat systems, and just generally a style of FF that didn't fit the exact same blueprints as sort of 10 and below. So I just wanted to clear that up, because we as FF fans, we all know that there is that portion of the fan base who are just absolutely hellbent on telling everyone at every given opportunity, night or day, that Final Fantasy died at 10. It died at 10, and everything 10 and above was absolute crap, and it's crap because that was Square Enix, it wasn't Square Soft, it was the merger that did it. Square Soft would never have done games like 10, 2, 11 and 12. It could not be any further from the truth. So I wanted to get that out there, and also I just want to say at this point, that's a subjective opinion. I personally could not disagree more. I see games that came out during the Square Enix era to be of the same quality. Now, I don't know how many of you share that opinion out there, but for me, being that my favourite FF games are 13-2, 10-2 and Type 0, I have a hell of a lot of love for new age FF games, and I know there's a lot of people like me who also like the newer FF games equally or as much or more than the older ones. And that's why I just want to say at this point, god damn, can we let it lay? Can we let it lay? Because it's so frustrating for anyone who's a fan of 13 or Type 0 or Dirge Cerberus. You cannot make a single post in nearly any Facebook group or forum without arseholes who are so obsessed with 1 to 10 that they feel the need to derail the thread. Escalate into an argument over quality, escalate into an argument over Enix and Soft. It's just ridiculous. There's some of us who just want to talk about the newer FS because we genuinely like them. But getting back to 2001, so it's not looking too bad at this point. The company has hit its first bout of red, but it's because they've got so much in the pipeline that hasn't come to fruition yet. And February the 8th, 2 weeks later, that's when things start taking a turn for the worst. Square does a management reshuffling. Now the reason for it is because they've hit a red, and all big companies, as they do, they like to knee-jerk react. And 3 key figures were affected by this reshuffling. One was Sakaguchi himself. He resigned as vice president, down to executive producer. Now, they say resign. In fact, they say resign for all 3 of these key figures, but how much of that is true is kind of fishy, because was Hisashi Suzuki one of the big board directors at the point? Did he really choose to optionally take a 50% pay cut? I highly doubt it, but that's exactly what happened. He took a 50% pay cut. And also a guy called Tamayuki Takeshi, he was the company president. and he went down to a contractual consultant for the company. So neither three of them are completely out, they've just moved down to lower roles. So notice the giant Spirits Within box office flop hasn't happened yet, and things are already starting to get a bit unstable within the company, and that goes on to get kind of displayed when on May the 14th, Sakaguchi randomly out of nowhere registers a domain called www.mistwalker.co.japan, followed by the registration of Mistwalker on United States Patent and Trademark Office on the 25th of May. So boom, Sakaguchi had already started looking for his own exit strategy at this point. There was probably a hell of a lot going on internally that we still don't know about, where he kind of knew he was probably going to be going out the door. But I also just want to talk about Sakaguchi at this point. A lot of the history of this merger kind of sees Sakaguchi as the victim, as the guy who was forced out just because he had a box office flop. But he is still the father of Final Fantasy, and if he was still around today, it would be fantastic. I've even heard people say Sakaguchi should have come back for FF15. Now I want to point out why this is ridiculous and why it's just unrealistic. Sakaguchi himself has admitted that the more that technology began to develop, the more he became out of his depth. In fact, he literally said that to Tabata when they met up for a meal at FF15. Sakaguchi, he said he thrived during old era of Final Fantasy. The old era of 2D sprites and turn-based combats and kind of the more simplistic video games compared to what we have today. And that's why, as you can see, Sakaguchi, even to this day, he's still working on things like mobile games and the kind of smaller budget games. It simply was not within his skill set, and it wasn't within his mindset nor his motivation to be able to work with the kind of games we have today. So this would have happened regardless of a merger, regardless of a box office flop. The father of Final Fantasy, his days were coming to an end. And while some might say, well, why couldn't Sakaguchi just still write the stories but then hand it over to someone to create? You know, that can only go so far. It gets to a point where technology and a vision for a game needs to be driven by somebody who knows the technology, knows what is capable, knows what boundaries they can push with video games, and no, that's why it wouldn't fit and Sakaguchi wouldn't fit. But full respect and love to the Gooch, because we're going to move on to where his career and reputation was shot down the shitter. I mean, there's no other way to say it, just shot clean down the shitter. July the 2nd, Square discusses financial woes with an over-budget movie hitting theatres next week, and a company that lost money in the last fiscal year. You can bet that shareholders are looking for some answers. Pretty scathing. So yeah, already it's over budget. And July the 2nd, so same day, weirdly enough, The Spirit Within releases and grosses 30 million domestically and will later go on to make 85 million in total. But the budget, including the development of Square Pictures itself, is at 137 million. Now, I kind of discussed this previously, why in its lifetime, the movie kind of wiped its face. Taking out the technology that was made to create the movie, which cost around about 40-50 million, taking that out, the movie almost wiped its face at the end of the day. And if they'd have gone on to use that 40-50 million to do those other two pictures that they said they were going to do, there was all the possibility that this could have, in a long term, made a profit. But at the time, it only made 30 mil. And the shitstorm begins. The company goes into an absolute panic. And to be fair, they have just hemorrhaged a fuckload of money. I mean, it's a lot. So much so, in fact, that on October the 3rd, skipping ahead a bit, after posting their operating losses in the previous fiscal year, Square had forecasted that they would make a 700 mil yen profit for that year, but in fact made a 13.9 billion yen loss, all to accommodate the poor performance of the film. Whew. So it was heavy and it hit them real hard. And of course you can imagine that merger that was being spoken about, yep, on July the 2nd, the terrible showing of Final Fantasy Spirits Within made Enix think twice about committing to the partnership. So the company is at an all-time low here, and even their big merger is about to go down the pan. I mean, understandable. Who's going to want to merge with a company that has just taken one of the biggest fiscal year losses in the company's history? This really should have been what sunk Squaresoft. And in fact, it probably would have done if it wasn't for this man here. So now we're going on to Yuichi Wada, the one you either hate or love by the end of this video. But just skipping back a bit. So Around this time in July that Spirits Within has just flopped, Final Fantasy X has also released. It snuck out the door and it sold on July the 24th more than 1.9 million units. So bear that in mind, because FF10's release is going to creep up on us later. So then on October the 9th, Squaresoft / Suzuki gets Sony to buy an 18.6% stake in Square. That was a strategy that they used to try to recoup some of the loss of the movie, because Sony helped produce Spirits Within. Moving on to November the 26th, CEO Suzuki will be stepping down as leader of the once profitable game company. Current COO Yuichi Wada is set to fulfill Suzuki's shoes, helping beginning December the 1st and hoping to lead the company in a restructuring plan that will return it to profitability. Now I'm going to say at this point that Suzuki leaving was a good thing. He wasn't that great a president. In fact, he was a bit of a bitch, to be fair. Now during his reign they really built up a pipeline of Final Fantasy games and did a lot of heavy investing. Now to be fair, Suzuki did inherit a lot of it, but as soon as he was booted out the door a couple of years later, he pretty much went all over on Twitter and called Square Enix out, said that their merger was a complete failure with no vision, but when he was asked specifics, all he could really say was, look at how much money Square Enix have lost, and he also went on to complain that the development costs were so heavy. It's neither the conduct nor the attitude that you need from a president. No, rather than trying to fix the issues and take aggressive restructuring measures to recoup the losses, and even talking about the development costs being too heavy, the only way Squaresoft were going to get out of this huge downturn was to invest heavily in the franchise. And Suzuki clearly demonstrated that he had neither the motivation nor the drive to make that sink or swim situation happen, but Yuichi Wada did, and he stepped up as the new company president. Now we slip to December 18th of 2001 still. Final Fantasy X then releases in North America, so we get it, again 10's creeping, bear it in mind. Now 2002, March 11th, Final Fantasy will return to a Nintendo, so they say. March 28th, Kingdom Hearts releases in Japan for the first time. Woo woo, Kingdom Hearts hype. Absolutely loving it on the live streams, really am. So damn gripped by the story, and that's what we have to really thank. Right there, Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy X. So 10 had its release in both North America and Japan, and Kingdom Hearts had just come out, and this was when things started getting back on track. So May the 15th, Square announces an upward revision of their earning forecasts for the current fiscal year. They saved the franchise, there's no other way to word it. Final Fantasy XI releases in Japan on the PS2, May the 28th. Is probably one of the other key events, a company restructure to take place, and Squaresoft announces Final Fantasy X spin-off, so they started the sequels. It was their idea, and of course it's very clever because reusing assets is very profitable. But I'm going to go to that company restructuring. That's the really significant one. So many people believe that it was the restructuring between Square Enix and Squaresoft that changed things, sort of changed the quality of the games, changed how it worked or changed how it operated. Well, it really wasn't the case, because Square formerly had a development style where the teams were sort of done by project, like individual projects, and they would go into the teams for those projects, and then that all got overhauled and the new structure was divisions. That's right, the division structure we have today, Division 1, for example, being the division that did FF15, Division 2 is the one who's doing the FF7 remake, then you've got like Division 4, which is mobile divisions, and I believe there are 8 divisions in total. That structure right there was something that Squaresoft came up with. The idea behind it being source codes and resources will be shared for efficiency between divisions, but also that employees will receive varying bonuses depending on the profit within their division. So I think this was an ingenious structure, and I still think it is one that works effective today, because it gets the people motivated within their divisions. They reap the rewards of what they create. They do well based on how well their project does and their game does, so there's that huge amount of motivation for them. But they also say by settling developers into divisions, Square also aim for the developers to reuse the titles they have developed, making game development more cost efficient, and they expected this restructuring to shave 1 billion yen off development costs. So this is Yuichi Wada's plan. This is what he's brought to the table. This is his step-by-step plan for getting the company back on track, and it worked. It actually worked, because Square's next fiscal results revealed that they were up 4.4 billion yen in profits by the end of that fiscal year. Again, you thank KH and FF10 for that, so perhaps you can't really thank Wada, but you'll see later on why his plan worked out. Then we go to September the 17th, Kingdom Hearts releases to North America. November the 13th, Square expects strong financial results. This is again very smart, going out, making strong financial statements. We expect profits to rise 72% to 7 billion. Regrowing the confidence in investors, shareholders, other companies. And then November the 17th, FF11 releases on PC in Japan. November the 25th, Square and Enix to merge. So the merge is now back on the table. The deal that was previously off the table is now back on. Now there's a lot of rumours and speculation of how Yuichi Wada went about that, and the people who want to paint him as a villain kind of have it as, he stepped in, said if you do away with Sakaguchi and put me in, I will get the merger back on track, and kind of sold Sakaguchi under the river, then came up with this aggressive restructuring plan, all to get this merger back on track. Now, however the ethics and however the method of Yuichi Wada, he managed to pull it off, and he said that this, and it was quoted, "This is an offensive merger. Square has also fully recovered," meaning this merger is occurring at a time when both companies are at their height. Now, the merger per se didn't go ahead straight away at that point. It was more of a testing the water period where they called it a virtual merger, and this was kind of where Enix more outsourced the games and Square sort of did all the development and creating by themselves. But moving on, December the 23rd, Kingdom Hearts achieves 1 million sales in North America, bringing the total of units shipped to 3 million worldwide. A big accomplishment, more than they thought they'd ever get. 2003, January the 11th. Things got really interesting, weird and spicy. So there was this shareholder at Squaresoft called Masafumi Miyamoto, and he was a huge shareholder in the company. In fact, he was so big that to make the merger go ahead, they actually needed his permission. And this Miyamoto fella came along and said that he had plans to bring the Enix and Soft merger to a screeching halt. And the reason for that is Miyamoto would find himself holding significantly less shares if the two RPG behemoths went through with the deal. One dude, one shareholder, was literally going to crap on the entire plan. Now, it didn't take long to fix the issue. 3 days later, Square Enix get the merger and a green light from Miyamoto. Now, the way they got this Miyamoto dude to settle, which I didn't know previously, was the exchange ratio of the shares was supposed to be 0.85 between Enix and Soft. But to resolve it, they had to alter the ratio up to a clean 1 from 0.85 for Miyamoto to agree. Boom! Shots fired. One dude literally changed the entire exchange ratio on a huge merger between two RPG. Crazy. But moving on, March 13th, Final Fantasy X-2 then releases in Japan and ships more than 1 million copies. This is seen as a phenomenal success, and they actually use it as a blueprint going forward. This is another huge misconception that some people think that 10.2 and 13.2 and Lightning Returns didn't do well. A lot of people actually seem to think that they flopped. Look, they sold half. 10.2 only sold half of 10, and 13.2 only sold half of 13. That's not a failure at all. In fact, they'd anticipated steeper drop-off curves. They thought they'd sell less because they know you have to play the first game to get the second, and that the drop-off rate for a continuing RPG story that is no longer self-contained is going to drop off quite significantly, especially when we have statistics like only 90% of gamers actually complete a game. Now, with that being true, who's going to play 13.2 without playing 13? I know there are some people who would do it, and inevitably they don't know what the fuck's going on. But anyway, that happens. 10.2 is a success in their eyes, and April the 1st is when it is officially announced that Square Co merges with Enix Corporation, and the company is subsequently renamed Square Enix. And that is how it happened. There's the story. It does continue on a bit more. Just finish this article off. So on July, Yuichi Wada relocates Square Enix headquarters to Shibuya-ku in Tokyo. I probably fucked that up. But the really bizarre and baffling, and this is where it's going to get strange, guys, he moved their headquarters due to Yuichi Wada having visited a fortune teller who had several locations in mind. He literally based the move on the decision of a fortune teller. But this was also kind of significant because it was this move here that made Nobu Uematsu officially leave. or he was planning to leave, but obviously he still kind of stayed involved in the franchise and is still involved today, but mostly with the concerts. But there it is, that was kind of Nobuo Uematsu's exit as well. But finishing off with Yoichi Wada. So why I don't think Yoichi Wada is the villain, and why I actually think he kind of saved the franchise. So just going on to this back business strategy here, as of July 2003, this was what Wada and the team came up with. So the first is to continue exploiting the franchise, like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. Now, I know that sounds bad, but that more or less just translates as keeping the pipeline going. But I mean, that's subjective. There are people who look at Yoichi Wada and go, he is the guy who milked the franchise. And this is a term I hear a lot. They've milked the Final Fantasy franchise for all it's worth. And to a degree, that's true. The question is, do you see what they milked as either being good or bad? But they definitely used Final Fantasy as a strategy to get themselves back. They invested heavily in the Final Fantasy franchise and had faith that it would pull through. And I don't see that as a bad thing, because they could quite as easily have pulled away. They could easily have seen what happened with Spirits Within and certain FF titles as being risky or dodgy, and maybe we should move into IPs and different things. That could easily have been the strategy, so I'm glad they went the other way, because otherwise we wouldn't have got 13, we wouldn't have got 15, the franchise would have been over by now. The other strategy was to employ cost-efficient development methodologies, such as reusing existing digital content assets. So this right here is the other reason why some people don't like Yoichi Wada, because he seems to be the one with the ethos of sequels and prequels and reusing content. So things like your Dirge of Cerberus, your Advent Children, your 13 trilogy. Now again, prequels and sequels, the stance on it is totally subjective. It's your opinion. But there is something in the fact that it says right here, it was extremely profitable and approved mythology to make 10-2. And not even just 10-2, but even now looking today, things like the HD remasters that we have, the PC reports, the upcoming 12 Zodiac Age. All of it is reusing assets, reusing already created content to make a profit. And this is where we're going to come into the argument of cash grabs. Is a HD remaster a cash grab? I've certainly seen it called so. Is a Steam port a cash grab? Now this is another one of those debates that will set Square Enix off against Squaresoft fans, and indeed they're quite right in saying Square Enix do use these tactics a lot more. These remasters, these ports, these special collector's editions, but we can't forget the backstory of why. It's because it's been in their strategy since 2003, and it's shown to work. It's shown that we, the consumer, buy it, that we want it, that we will spend our money, and it will be something that will bring money in for the company. But the reason they learned this lesson, and Yoichi Wada learned it, is because this is a tactic he had to deploy to bring the company back from a brink, and it was something that was done during Squaresoft days because of a flopped Squaresoft movie and an overinflated pipeline. So here it is, another screen of it. Our business strategy continued to exploit the current franchise in cost-efficient manner. It sounds so bad when it's said like that. Expansion into online and mobile segments. So this is where we really sort of began to see the birth of the mobile gaming, something that they're still using today and is proving hugely profitable. Brave Exvius, Mobius, I mean, you don't really have to look far to see that Square Enix are really hitting the mobile titles. Enhancement of global business, definitely something they're doing, and strategic initiative, whatever the fuck that means. However, rounding this out, Yoichi Wada, he is clinical, he is a businessman, he is straight to the point, he's clean cut. And now, Yoichi Wada is not the president of Square Enix anymore, that is now Matsuda. But during Mr. Wada's time, why I think he was a success for the company, it follows into these charts here. This is kind of a summary of his success. So Wada kind of came on, remember, mid-2000-ish. And look what he had to pick up. He had to pick up an absolute shit show. He's kind of like the Tabter. He had to pick it up from a really low point and somehow turn it around into a success. And that's exactly what he did. Now, reading out some of the accomplishments. So first of all, he shirked a lot of that Spirits Within loss onto Sony. That was a huge recovery. Then he came up with the entire recovery to profitability plan, which include reforming the product development lines and the divisions. So basically streamlining their processes. There were some other business deals, like he sold DigiCube share, says here, closed Square USA, brought back 3 subsidiaries into Square headquarters. But the really key ones are reported a record profit in the history of Square. I mean, a record profit after that absolute road crash 2000. Then when there's some others, resumed business with Nintendo after 6-year blank, announced merger between Enix and Square, and dissolved a joint venture between Electronic Arts and Square. Ooh, I didn't even know that. Didn't even know there was supposed to be a joint venture. Here's some more of the operating income and margins. Some of you smarter motherfuckers can pause this video here and take a look. I mean, this video is already long enough. I'm not going to sit breaking these down, but here it is all, guys. All the information for you. I found this entire article completely fascinating, but what really stuck out to me is what I've kind of already known, but it really confirmed to me, is that this whole notion that the change between Square Enix and Squaresoft somehow brought about a change in quality or a change of style in the game, or that merger is the reason for why the Final Fantasy franchise is what it is now. It's really a bullshit argument, and there's really no truth to it. In fact, all of the evidence seems to show that even if a merger had never happened, the franchise would still have looked the same all the way up until FF12, and if the merger hadn't have happened, we probably would never have got FF13. I mean, in fact we wouldn't have. FF13 was insanely expensive, as is FF15 looking to shape up, and 14, the MMO, probably also would never have happened or become the success it would have been. The entire reason, in fact, why Square Enix even managed to pull FF14 back from the brink, it was because of the division structure. They gave Yoshida full control of FF14 and allowed that division to really run with that project. Even Yoshida himself admitted that the whole reason why FF14 was pulled back from the brink is because they were given this creative independence. Not to say they didn't have it before, it's just that the previous director for FF14, he was trying to compete supposedly against EverQuest, which was a huge MMO at the time. They were trying to compete with it, and that's what made it fall apart at the seams. And supposedly the original FF14 team were all made to play EverQuest for an entire year to try to get the vision for what they wanted FF14. So it's trying to copy something. It wasn't organic, it wasn't fresh, but nevertheless that was the decision that previous team made. So the point I'm trying to make, guys, is throughout Squaresoft and Square Enix, we've never seen a time where the divisions or the teams working on the game haven't had full creative independence. In fact, even with FF15, Tabata said that exact same thing. He said, we do have, as directors, full creative control to do whatever we did. So that has never changed. This idea that Squaresoft were these kind of hip Japanese legends, your Sakaguchi, your Kitase, your Nomura's, they would just all chill when they had full creative control, and that's why it was dope. And then Square Enix came on, and they're this big corporation, and they laid out the rules and made them do things they didn't want to do. It's all just a false narrative that I wanted to clear up in this video. Regardless of the merger, Sakaguchi still would have been at his depth. Kitase, he's still involved in it today. Najima, he's still involved in it today. Nomura, he still would have got involved in the Kingdom Hearts franchise during that 2000 era, and kind of stepped away from the FF scene. The fact that FF12 and 13 were handed over to different directors, and indeed 15, it all would have happened regardless. Ports, remasters would have happened. Combat systems would have changed. It began changing at the end of Squaresoft days. The gaming climate would have still changed today. Gamers would still become more action orientated and less turn-based orientated, and indeed less RPG things still would have had to have moved forward. I think people have this impression that if it remained Squaresoft, we'd still be getting, turn-based combats and overworld maps. The age of technology would still look the same. Squaresoft would have to overcome the same issues that Square Enix, and in fact every game developer has to overcome now, which is, how do you get these games out with running at this kind of technical performance without a strong DLC structure, without fixes and bugs and day one patches, and a huge marketing campaign with different bonuses from Amazon and Game Store and GameStop and this store and that online service. Gamers would still be connected to developers, and companies would still be connected to their fans due to the age of media. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, more connected than they ever were back in Squaresoft days. Fans who will tear their hair out if they don't get an ATR or a trailer or an event or a conference, and in turn the marketing teams have had to get bigger, and they've had to make their directors do and say things, because when a director of a game like Final Fantasy can say something that can actually change the shareholding value of the company, and we've seen it happen many times, Squaresoft would have still had to have adapted to this, and they would have still had to make their developers do and say things. I can't see that anything would have been different, and that's the main point I want to get across in this video. I hope you guys have found it interesting. There were a hell of a lot of facts in that I didn't even know, and I just want to clear up that this video is in no way me saying that you can't say that you prefer one or the other. Of course you can have your opinion and say you prefer Squaresoft games or Square Enix games. If you do prefer those, of course you're more than entitled to say which you prefer. I'm doing this video because I will often see people then take it one step further and start making assumptions, and 90% of the time they just turn out to be totally factually incorrect. But there it is on the table. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until the next video, Kubo!